Welcome to the TheoTherapist podcast, where theologically trained licensed therapists share health and healing conversations. Join our host, Dr. Trice for conversations about real-life issues from both theological and therapeutic perspectives.
Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the TheoTherapist podcast. I am Dr. Trice, the host for our podcast. Today's episode is episode 8, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. We have another wonderful guest with us. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, and follow us at the TheoTherapist podcast. We also have a website. You can find us at thetheotherapist.com or look at seeksolacenow.com for more information about me. Just as a disclaimer for our episode today, these episodes are intended to be purely informational. They are not intended to be a substitute for therapy. So we strongly encourage you, if you don't already have a professional relationship with a therapist, that you seek one out. So glad that you're joining us today. Today, we're talking about one of the things that is passionate for me, as well as our guest today, and that is taking care of the caregivers, taking care of those who pour back into others. And so the title of today's podcast is The Wounded Healer and the Call of the Spirit. Our guest today is Marcus Price, MDiv, MSW, and a LCSW. If that's not a mouthful, he is a licensed clinical social worker working in behavioral health. He also works in his own private practice, and I'm going to let him tell you more about that in just a little bit. He has dual master's degrees. He has one in social work from Smith College, as well as an MDiv from the Interdenominational Theological Center, better known as the ITC. And there he got his degree in the psychology of religion and pastoral care. He has a passion for the holistic care that happens when we, lead others and serve others in spiritual care. And so he's done some CPE. For those of you who know what clinical pastoral education is, he's done 2 different residencies, one at Emory University Midtown and another one at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So he himself is a caregiver. He himself is caring for others who give care. And so welcome. So glad you're with us today, Marcus. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that I'm in a space to talk about something that's important to me on both a professional and personal level.
Absolutely. I think so often it's important that we stop and pause and look at those who offer care at this kind of intersection point, because there is so much that affects the caregiver, the person who is the care provider. And I use that terminology, but basically we are the mental health providers who sit at that intersection space of integrating spiritual care and recognizing that there are, mental health terminologies and theories that guide our practice as well. And so for those who sit at this intersection point, rarely is someone turning a lens toward us and what our needs might be. Right. So I applaud you and thankful that you're doing this work, Marcus. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the folks? Anything that I didn't mention you want to let them know?
My journey into being a care provider started when I was very young. I received a call to ministry at a very young age, but it didn't really start to materialize until later on, like my early 20s, when I enrolled in seminary. And while I was in seminary, what brought me to seminary was I had a lot of questions. Questions of what kind of initiated me fully into caring ministry with people. And so there was a lot of deconstructing that happened for me while I was in seminary. And I went in initially thinking I was going to be a pastor because that's what was familiar to me growing up. I saw the traditional version of what it meant to be a care provider in the form of the pastoral. And so I thought that meant I would be in a pulpit and that I would be preaching every Sunday and leading a flock. And that's certainly one form of how that looks. But what I discovered in the seminary journey was that it wasn't going to look like that for me. And so that ended up being a whole grief journey that I had to undergo as I was deconstructing. And so what ended up happening was I went into the field of pastoral care and chaplaincy and did a few residencies. And that experience taught me a lot about what it means to sit with suffering, what it means
Right.
to not be able to fix things, what it means to just be able to sit with people who are trying to find meaning. And so, one thing I'm very thankful about my seminary training, my spiritual training, is that it helped me to help people find meaning. And I
Mm-hmm.
think then when I got to a point in chaplaincy, working with people, helping them in the midst of their suffering, I wanted to switch and move in a direction of working with people at the earlier phases of their life and not so much toward the end. Because not only did I think one thing that I failed to mention was that I also was a hospice chaplain as well before I fully
Oh, okay.
transitioned into being a therapist. And so I got to a point where I was like, okay, I love sitting with people in these ways, but I would like to work with them earlier on in their journeys,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I ended up going back to school to study clinical social work at Smith College School for Social Work. And in that program, I learned about psychodynamic therapy and theory. And that helped me to learn about how to listen for the hidden, how to listen for the unconscious, the parts that are
Mm-hmm.
not spoken, which also really dovetailed nicely with how I was being trained as a chaplain and in
Right.
seminary, which is all about sitting in mystery and sitting with questions and learning how to listen to your wounds and other people's wounds and all of that. And so um, my call has evolved, is what I'm trying to say. It started
Hmm.
one way, and now I find myself in a different space, and now I'm even reimagining my relationship with the divine at this point. And I wouldn't say that that reimagining is because I'm lost, but what I would say is that it's because I'm more curious now. And I think that
Right.
it's one of the things that really benefits the clients that I sit with and help, is having that open curiosity and being willing to not give them pat answers and quick fixes. And, that's one of the drawbacks, I think, of some mental health techniques, is that it's
Mm-hmm.
about just, really alleviating quickly people's symptoms. But what if the symptoms are trying to really teach people something? And so if we move them too quickly past their symptoms and give them that quick relief, which, I think people do deserve to have relief from pain and suffering, but at the same time, what can they really learn? How can this help them to evolve and grow as a person? And so that's why I'm really into depth oriented therapy. I'm being trained at
Mm-hmm.
the Emory Psychoanalytic Institute right now, because I
Oh, wonderful.
really want to understand how to do psychodynamic therapy with folks. And so, yeah, I just said a mouthful, but those are maybe some other things that people don't know about me and what brings me to this work and what helped to kind of shape and form me into the kind of therapist that I am.
Well, and that's so powerful that you added that. When we think about chaplaincy and the fact that you have worked with people from children to adulthood to hospice,
Mhm,
which is kind of the end stages, and to see what it means to sit with others in the midst of hurt, pain, crises, distress in those different, developmental stages.
mhm.
I think that speaks a lot to being a well-rounded therapist,
Yeah,
simply because you know what it means to sit in that ash with someone.
yeah,
And not many people have that experience. Even those who are therapists typically just learn from a modality and then they operate out of that modality. But
yeah.
they haven't really had to um, kind of suppress their own anxiety and sit in the midst of that long term with others. So
Right. Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm curious, this intersection that you have connected, because this is something I'm always interested in. What made you say, I think I have to be the person that works in this intersection space. I'm not just going to be a social worker. I'm not just going to be a chaplain. I'm not just going to be a pastor. I'm going to try to hold all these together in
Mhm.
tandem.
Yeah. So what made me stay was I'm a better therapist when I'm connected to spirit.
Hmm.
When I'm not connected with spirit, or when I'm neglecting my spiritual self, or that part of me, I notice sometimes um, I'm, I become a little bit detached, irritable, not quite centered, a little off balance. And so it's almost a requirement in order for me to be able to do this work for me to be rooted and grounded in spirit in some form or fashion. Does that mean that I
Hmm.
always bring that into the therapy room in an explicit way? No. But the way that I'm listening to people comes from a spiritual perspective, in the sense that I'm not just listening to what they're saying on the surface, or as we say in the therapy world, the explicit content, right? But I'm also listening to that latent content. I'm listening to the deeper meaning. And I think the only way that someone can really move into that space with someone is if they're listening to what their soul is deeply yearning for underneath the complaints or the presenting problem, right? There are a lot of existential things that people are bringing into the office. Some people, they have no framework to operate out of, right? And so, how
Right.
do I, as a therapist, provide that containment for them and that holding space for them to be able to
Hmm.
figure out things? Now, I'm not proselytizing, I'm not projecting my own belief system onto them, but I'm trying to figure out what's meaningful to them. What are their ultimate concerns? What are the things that are bigger than them that they're really trying to get connected to? And that's what I'm finding at the root of a lot of the presenting problems, that people feel fundamentally disconnected from a deeper part of themselves that they know is there. And they know if they get connected to it, they could have a richer, fuller, and more meaningful life. But how do they do that? They do that with someone who's willing to be a spiritual companion, someone who's not going to give them an easy answer, someone who's going to challenge them to think. And sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes people are going to feel like I don't know what the answer is. But then, like, when you have a grounded presence there who's like, it's okay not to know, and we can kind of abide
Hmm.
in this, and we will get there, like, still providing that assurance that we will get to a place where you will have a sense of knowing.
Right.
Um, I think that's what keeps me operating in this tension. Um, I think it's my winning formula, honestly.
Is that what led you to work in this passion area that you have about helping, wounded healers and, being more attuned to their call of the spirit?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think my own wounds have been an initiation into the work of therapy.
Hmm.
And I think that helping people to identify their wounds can help them be initiated into something deeper with themselves as well.
Absolutely. I do think, I think of Henry Nowland's work when you say wounded healer, right? Recognizing that even those of us who are called to sit and be containers in these spaces and to sit with others, have our own wounds.
Hmm.
And it is making sure that we are attentive to the wounding that we have as well in this process,
Yeah,
that we don't get to just be a blank slate in anybody else's world. We bring what we have in that world as well. One
absolutely.
of the biggest challenges that I've had, kind of in just the last month, one of my goddaughters passed away. And so while I'm in a season of grieving, I'm also still holding space for others and containing that, but choosing,
Yeah,
what that looks like for me and honoring where I was,
yeah,
but also knowing what I was called to do in those spaces.
yeah. And I mean, think about how much that's positively affecting the care you're offering someone when you're connected to
Hmm.
that, right? How deeply and more precisely you're listening, because you
Hmm.
know what it means to sit in deep grief. And I think
Right.
that's really the gift that keeps on giving when we're able to really identify our wounds and claim them, not
Hmm.
be ashamed of them, because it's really easy. I've been there to feel ashamed of certain things that we have been taught are defects, or something that is wrong that needs to be fixed. Um, but when you can embrace them, I think there's a lot
Hmm.
that you can offer people that if you don't embrace, you really can't offer them in a really impactful way.
And I think being in those spaces and being honest about our wounds, because when we're in that hurting space, we're more attuned to our own spiritual walk
Mm,
because we're relying on God, to navigate through those spaces ourselves. And I think that being more attuned helps us in
yeah,
care for others. because we're already seeking God in this way. And if we're, kind of joining paths or journeys with somebody else that's doing the same thing, I feel like it enlightens, or it amplifies that journey together.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I agree.
For you, when you started thinking of wounded healer and kind of the call of the spirit, what in particular stood out to you as this is the thing I want to make sure that I say to others that are kind of navigating this journey?
Mm. That being able to provide care, effective care, does not mean that one has to be um, healed enough.
Hmm.
That you can still be in process as you're in process with other people, and that something really powerful and beautiful can come out of learning how to co-journey with people, and being at home in not having mastered something, right? Moving out of mastery and into mystery, right?
Hmm.
And learning how to sit in that, and learning how to, I guess, like, use it to continue to evolve,
Hmm.
you know? I think that's the main message I want to get across, that you don't have to be healed enough, and that there's value in not being healed enough, and um, take pressure off of yourself. You're being supported by something much greater than you, and
Hmm.
trust that. In inviting therapists to, because I know that in a lot of the training that many secular therapists receive, like even when I was in graduate school, I had a course at Smith on spirituality and psychotherapy. And I liked the course. I enjoyed the content and the professor. But there was a way in which I noticed a lot of my colleagues were afraid to touch that and afraid
Hmm.
to venture into that, for a multitude of reasons. Their own histories, not feeling like they had the competence or the tools to kind of navigate that arena and all of that. But um, there are so many people who are bringing that into the therapy room with them. And to
Absolutely.
me, it's like, how can you not address that?
I mean, it is a part of our competency. So,
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And so I'm what I'm trying to say is, like, even with that, so many people were hesitant about touching that because they didn't feel
hmm.
enough in some way, right? And you
Hmm.
don't have to feel enough, but you just have to be willing to abide in the unknown, right? And that is uncomfortable. I'm not trying to make it seem like it's an easy thing to do. It's hard for me sometimes because I'm like, this person is suffering in front of me, and I just want to help them not feel this pain, but that's not my job to do. And reminding myself constantly that's not it's not my job to ease the pain or fix something, right? But to create a space for the natural healing potentialities of the client to really
Hmm.
emerge in the therapy space. And I do that with questioning, I do that with containment, I do that with reflection. I do that with,
Hmm.
providing them with tangibles, for sure, because people need something to hold on to. Because if things are too abstract for certain, like, highly analytical people, they can't get on board. Um, but yeah, so I'm saying all that to say that it's okay to be in process.
It is. And I think your words are super profound. So many therapists and those who offer care are working on mastery. They want to be the expert. They want to know that they have done everything right. But leaning into the mystery feels so unnerving for a lot of people. But I do think that's a space of growth. That's a growing edge, right?
Yeah,
Being able to lean into mystery and not see that as a deficit,
yeah,
not see that like I'm lacking something because I'm not trying to help find the answer for this thing.
right.
Mm. I wish more. therapists who are like either starting in their careers or who are even middle, kind of midway in their careers,
Mhm,
would reconnect, like take a time, like take a month or a week or something and reconnect
mhm.
to that side of themselves so that they could kind of be replenished.
Yeah.
That speaks to the guiding question we have for this podcast is, how can therapists replenish their souls while they're caring for others?
Uh,
Because that
that's a big
replenishing, I
question,
tell
man.
you,
That's a big question. I'm
it's
constantly
necessary.
it's necessary, and there's no easy answer, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what that looks like for me. It gets kind of annoying sometimes hearing, do your self care, do your self care. Um, but what I'm realizing is that the self care for me is not necessarily just rest, right? Like we think,
Mhm,
for me, when I think of self care, I think, okay, I need to take a vacation, and I need to take a break, and I need to just decompress, and I need to rest. But what I'm realizing now, thanks to the help of my spiritual director companion, I'm so glad I'm back at spiritual direction now. But anyhow, is that the self care that I need is about
mhm,
reconnecting to the things that I know really help me to feel close to spirit,
right.
and help
Mhm,
me to feel grounded and help me to feel nourished. Um, that to me is the self care. That to me is the replenishment. So I'm doing less of the resting in the physical sense and more of like, okay,
mhm,
what is the thing that's going to be that fresh air that I need? That's going to be life
absolutely.
giving. That's going to lift me up. Those are the things that will sustain me. And I think more people need to ask that question as opposed
Mhm,
to, you know, um, doing different activities, right?
right. And I think it's a combo, right?
Right.
I'm someone who gets a chance to counsel therapists, and I'm often asking, like, where are the spaces that you have where you have no responsibilities? Like, you don't have any titles, no one's calling you something. Have you created spaces where you just get to be you? I think there is something not only humbling about that, but it's grounding because
Mhm.
so many of us live in this space of responsibility where we have so much kind of weight connected to responsibility that I think we need spaces where nobody knows your name. You
Yeah.
need spaces where you can kind of just go and be, and particularly those of us who also are clergy, because now you no longer you don't have Sundays, you don't have the house of worship sometimes as that space where you can just go and be anonymous and receive.
Mhm.
Because the next thing is you need to be poured back into. We pour out so much,
Yes.
we're constantly pouring out.
Yes.
How are you being replenished? What's pouring back into you?
Right.
It may not be self-care activities like a massage. It's good to get those, but maybe for you, you need to go to Sedona for a week and just sit in some spiritual realm and, reconnect in a way that you haven't done in a long time. Or maybe there's something else that replenishes you. You've got to go to your favorite concert and go see
Yeah.
Beyonce. I don't
Yes.
care what it is,
Yes.
but it is something that for you reconnects to something that you have been depleted in.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of therapists, they just kind of end up going through the motions. And
Yeah.
that's when they're in threat of burnout, is because they are just doing the thing and they're
Right.
not replenishing.
And they're not replenishing. Another thing that helps to replenish for me is my relationships. And I
Mm-hmm.
notice that when I'm not caring for my close relationships the way I need to, that also can lead to a sense of imbalance and a sense of depletion. And so,
Mm-hmm.
really taking care of those relationships, staying connected to the people that I enjoy being around, and like you said, just let me be. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the things that help me to really feel full again. Because healing is relational. Like I can't do that by myself all the time. Of course, I'm in
Mm-hmm.
relationship with me, but I'm also in relationship with other people. And we're wired that way, and I think that's an important part of what it means to be in balance and have good
Mm-hmm.
mental health. Our relationships are a tremendous protective factor in having good mental health. So, yeah,
Absolutely. And I think all of that matters, right? Making sure we're reconnecting to self, making sure that we're connecting to others who are, people who can feed back into us and who allow us to be ourselves. And then also making sure that we're putting in some practices that kind of reinvigorate us and that are life giving.
Sure.
because without those things, then you feel like you become an empty container.
Mhm.
And that not only do you not have anything to pour out of, you just holding all the toxicity
For
inside.
sure. Yeah.
And that is definitely not a long-term strategy for well-being, which
Mhm.
is ultimately our goal, is that you be well
Right.
in the midst of your caring for others, that you be well. Um, I'm also curious, when I talk to people about kind of this long journey of
Mhm.
of being a spiritual care provider. What does growth look like? For some
Mhm.
people, growth is just, kind of learning new things, but I'm wondering, what's your view of like what growth might look like in spiritual care providing?
Mm. That's a deep question. What
Oh,
growth looks like.
hey, we
Well,
like to go there sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So, well, right now, the thing that I'm focused on growing is my practice. Seed and oak.
Hmm.
It's in the name. We're growing from a seed
Exactly.
to something that is strong and magnificent. And so I'm focused on that right now. But then also just evolving as a person, um,
Hmm.
allowing myself to have new experiences. I've been doing a lot more traveling these days. Hopefully, going to South Africa beginning of this
Oh,
coming
wonderful.
year. I went to Ghana end of last year, and
Okay.
so I'm doing that, and so it's just like expanding my experiences is what growth looks like for me right now.
Hmm.
It's not. I mean, I'm acquiring lots of training. Of course, studying at the institute, the Psychoanalytic Institute, and I'm doing a hypnotherapy training. Doing all these things, and so that's a part of my growth. But it's really just allowing myself to evolve and widen, and yeah, and be.
Mm. I wonder, as you reflect on what it means to be a caregiver now with so much anxiety in our culture, our political landscape has really affected not just individuals, but what those individuals are bringing into the counseling space.
Hmm.
And I'm hearing, the secondary trauma and vicarious trauma to therapists of just trying to hold a space when they're just as anxious as the clients are about what's happening and what's going on. I wonder if that's anything you've been doing any reflecting on or you have thoughts around.
Yeah. Um, I have a lot of clients who are coming in talking about the political landscape and how it's affecting them. And I think the reminder that I keep giving to them is that the opposite of anxiety is not calm but trust, right? Like
Hmm.
what can you trust in right now? What is your I used to have a CPE supervisor at Choi who used to say, "What is your?" I think she would say, "What is your square leg or square something?" But the thing that you
Hmm.
can stand on, right? That you can always go back to. And so I'm inviting clients these days to think more about what can you put your trust in? What are you certain of? What is in your zone of control? Because so much of anxiety is about trying to control things that are outside of your zone of control. So bringing
Hmm.
people back home to that can help them find some kind of anchoring amidst all of the chaos and turmoil that this administration and that this world just seems to be in right now. And so also reminding folks about like having the small rituals, grounding themselves in focusing on the daily tasks on one day at a time.
Hmm.
I mean, like, even if you want to take a recovery approach, right? We doing 24 hours at a time.
Hey, I have pulled that serenity prayer out a lot in recent weeks.
Because that's on a lot of days, that's really all that you can handle. And
Hmm.
that provides a little bit of containment for people enough for them to manage that, and then they can do the next day and the next day. They don't have to have everything figured out. They don't have to have a master plan. As a matter of fact, I would not even advise a master plan because there's just so much that's in flux. And
Right.
even if you try to create some kind of master plan, it would change. And we don't want to
You
hold
don't
on.
have enough information to even develop
No,
a
not
master
at all,
plan.
not at all. So, encouraging flexibility, cognitive
Hmm.
flexibility, excuse me, flexibility in the way people are thinking about things, keeping an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
challenging long held beliefs, core assumptions that might be keeping people from seeing other vantage points and blocking
Right.
them in some way.
And I also hold space for grieving and loss for
Yes.
those who feel like we've lost something.
Hmm.
Particularly those who've been connected to like the federal government or federal contracts or research, and their livelihoods have been affected
Yeah.
kind of by what's happening, and just, sitting with them in those spaces of loss,
Yes.
through no fault of their own, as they would say, right? And so,
Mhm.
recognizing that there is so much happening, and I think those of us who are spiritually inclined are paying attention to kind of that what's happening in the spiritual ethos of what's going on.
Yes.
We can feel it interpsychically, that there is just this angst, there is this unrest, this dis-ease
Mhm.
that's happening. And I think that for those of us who are attentive and paying attention to that, we're hyper aware of it a little bit. I know I am,
Yeah.
not just in what my clients tell me, but, feeling it in the room.
Yeah.
You can kind of walk in certain spaces and just feel that there is an air of unrest.
Yeah. Yeah. And normalizing that too, and reminding people
Hmm.
that they're not crazy for feeling that. Because sometimes I think people judge themselves for not having it all together, for not being able to operate the way that they used to operate
Hmm.
pre-COVID, this administration. And there's so much that has changed, and I'm not sure that people are really acknowledging that. And I think coming into a therapy space that normalizes that, acknowledges that, helps people to feel less judged for
Hmm.
falling apart, falling apart,
Exactly.
and then having a space to try to put some of those pieces back together again.
Mm. I so appreciate being able to talk to someone who kind of, like I said, walks this journey
Mhm.
of being intentional in this integration, and being intentional to, look at what this experience is like for those of us who are on the care providing side.
Mhm.
Because not often that the attention doesn't often reflect what's happening on this side of the curtain, if you will. Are there other things that you'd like to highlight kind of today about, either your reflections or kind of the work that you've been doing?
As far as the work that I've been doing, at Seed and Oak, which is my practice, we're doing a lot of work with couples in relationship.
Mm.
I think that's actually the niche that we're really starting to develop. I've also brought on an associate therapist who's also doing couples work, African American woman. She specializes in working with Black women who are in relationships and helping them to unpack their relationships with others as well as themselves. And those who are trying to juggle many things at once, being a wife, being a mother, being this, being that. And so that's what we're doing there. Um,
Hmm.
and we just want to continue to help people cultivate their relationships and build stronger ones.
Absolutely. It's so needed.
Yeah.
There needs to be more of us, right?
Yeah.
Who live in this intentional integration space. Marcus, I'm so thankful that you joined me today on the podcast. It's been refreshing
Mhm.
to talk to you and to kind of lift up this topic. Would you tell our listeners, our viewers, how they can find you and how they can follow you and get more information about you?
Yes. You can find me at www.seedandcounseling.com. You can also look me up on Instagram. We have a Seed and Oak Counseling page on Instagram and Facebook. And there you will find all the contact information for myself and the other therapists that are working at Seed and Oak at this time.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being a part of this conversation today. I know that there are others out there who wish they could talk one on one with us and just kind of ask those questions, but I pray and hope that they got something from today that's going to help them continue to walk this journey. And so thank you once again for listening to us. We encourage you to like, subscribe, and follow us on all platforms as well as on YouTube. Make sure that you share this information, and we will continue to offer more episodes. We probably have one more this season, and we look forward to having you here with us the next time. Take care of yourself and be well.
TheoTherapist Podcast, real talk at the intersection of theology and therapy. Check out Dr. Glenn's new journal series titled Brain Dump Journals for the Busy, available on Amazon. Visit our websites for more information at thetheotherapist.com or catriceglenn.com.